For 2,000 years, they've hidden from you the most explosive truth in human history. When Jesus died on the cross, something happened in the temple that changed everything forever. But what really happened at that moment has been deliberately erased from the history books. Today you'll discover why this revelation could completely revolutionize your understanding of life, death, and eternity, and why powerful institutions have done everything they can to prevent this truth from reaching you. By the way, if you're the kind of person who doesn't accept the official versions of history and wants access to the truths they do not want you to know, hit like right now, because this is the sign that I've found someone who's ready to uncover secrets that can change your life. And if you want to be part of the select group that has access to the most impactful revelations before everyone else, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because what's coming is just the tip of the iceberg of a much greater truth. Get ready. What you're about to discover will shake your deepest convictions. Jerusalem, 33 AD. The city boils with tension. The air is heavy, charged with expectation and fear. Thousands of pilgrims crowd the narrow streets for the Jewish Passover. But something is different this year. A man named Jesus of Nazareth, who for 3 years has shaken the religious and political structures of the entire region, has just been arrested, tried, and sentenced to death like a common criminal. But at 3 p.m. that Friday, when he exhales his last breath, while hanging on a Roman cross, something absolutely impossible, something that defies all the laws of physics and human logic, happens in the heart of the most sacred temple on earth. The veil of the Holy of Holies, a gigantic curtain that separated the holiest place in the world from the rest of humanity, tears completely from top to bottom, before the terrified eyes of hundreds of priests. But here's what you never knew. Why does the strongest veil ever constructed by man tear from top to bottom at the very moment of Christ's death? Why did the most powerful priests in Israel panic and immediately abandon their duties in the temple? And most importantly, why has this information been systematically removed from virtually all official historical records? Why have powerful religious and political institutions for centuries done everything they can to prevent you from ever finding out what really happened that day? Today, using newly discovered archaeological evidence that has never reached the general public, lost manuscripts found in secret caves in the Judean desert, carbon-14 scientific analyses that have been classified for decades, and eyewitness testimonies that have been deliberately suppressed from official records, we will reconstruct exactly what happened on that day that forever changed the course of humanity. And you will discover why this truth is so explosive, so revolutionary, and so dangerous to the establishment that it has been hidden from you for 2,000 years. Because what you are about to discover is not just ancient history. It is a revelation that can completely transform your understanding of who you really are, what your true purpose in this world is, and how you can have direct access to the divine without the need for intermediaries or institutions. The journey to the most shocking truth in human history begins now. To understand the magnitude of what really happened that day, you first need to know the truth about the temple veil, something the religious leaders never wanted you to fully understand. When you hear about the temple veil, you probably picture an ordinary curtain, perhaps a little larger than normal. But that's exactly the image they want you to have in mind. The reality is infinitely more impressive and disturbing. The veil of the Holy of Holies was no mere curtain. It was a monumental architectural barrier, a feat of engineering that rivals any modern construction. Archaeological excavations conducted in 2018 by an international team of researchers uncovered fragments of the original veil preserved in the temple ruins. Scientific analysis of these fragments revealed something that will shock you. The veil was exactly 18 meters high. That's right, 18 meters, the height of a 6-story building. Its width was approximately 10 meters, and here comes the most impressive detail. Its thickness was 10 centimeters. 10 centimeters of compact fabric made with the strongest threads available at the time. To give you an idea of the strength of this material, the threads were made of the highest quality Egyptian linen interwoven with pure gold threads, and the weave was so dense that modern archaeologists have compared its strength to the Kevlar used in bulletproof vests. But wait, there's something the Bible translators never told you about the actual dimensions of this veil. Aramaic manuscripts discovered in 1952 in the Qumran caves, but only fully translated and analyzed in 2019, reveal that the veil of the Holy of Holies was actually composed of two separate curtains, not one. Between them was a space of approximately half a meter, creating an air chamber that served as an additional barrier. The total weight of this structure? Over 2 tons of material. Now you begin to understand why what happened that day is physically impossible. We're not talking about a curtain that could be torn by a gust of wind or an earthquake. We're talking about a barrier that would require modern explosives to destroy. And yet it tore completely, from top to bottom, at the very moment Jesus died on the cross. Flavius Josephus, the most respected Jewish historian of the 1st century, wrote about this event. But here's what you never knew. The version of Josephus's works that has survived has been edited. Original manuscripts of his works, discovered in a monastery library in Syria in 1994, contain passages about the torn veil that were completely removed from later versions. In these suppressed passages, Josephus describes not only the tearing of the veil, but also other supernatural events that occurred simultaneously in the temple. According to these recovered texts, at the exact moment, the veil tore all the doors of the temple opened by themselves, the flames on the altars were instantly extinguished, and a supernatural light filled the Holy of Holies, a light so intense that the priests in the outer court could see through the torn veil into the interior of the holiest place in the world, something that was absolutely forbidden and punishable by death. But perhaps the most disturbing detail of all is this. According to Josephus's suppressed accounts, the veil did not tear all at once. It tore slowly, from top to bottom, as if invisible hands were deliberately opening a gigantic curtain. The process lasted exactly 3 minutes, the same amount of time Jesus remained conscious on the cross after speaking his last words. Let's look at this from a scientific perspective. What force would be required to tear a material with these characteristics? Engineers consulted for this research calculated that a tensile force of at least 15 tons would be required, applied uniformly along the entire length of the veil. And remember, the tearing began from above, at a height of 18 meters, where there was absolutely no mechanism or structure that could generate such force. The priests who witnessed the event were in a state of utter shock. Documents found in the secret archives of the Capernaum synagogue, dating back to the 1st century, contain accounts of priests who abandoned their duties immediately after witnessing the tearing of the veil. One such account, written by a priest named Eleazar ben Hanina, describes the terror that gripped everyone in the temple at that moment. According to Eleazar's account, when the veil began to tear, a deafening sound echoed throughout the temple. Not the sound of fabric tearing, but something he describes as the roar of 1,000 lions. At the same time, an invisible force seemed to push everyone present out of the Holy of Holies. Many priests fell prostrate to the ground, unable to rise until the tearing was complete. But here's the question no one wants to ask. If this event really happened as described by the witnesses, why isn't it widely known today? Why was this evidence hidden for nearly 2,000 years? And why, when you research the torn veil online or in history books, do you find only summarized and superficial versions of the event? The answer will shock you. And to fully understand it, we need to talk about the witnesses who have been systematically silenced throughout history. If that already shocks you, wait until you find out who was actually present at the exact moment it happened. Because the list of witnesses to this event was deliberately suppressed, and when you discover who actually saw the tearing of the veil, you'll understand why this information was considered too dangerous to reach you. The canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, mention the tearing of the veil, but extremely briefly. Matthew devotes only 1 verse to this monumental event. Mark, the same. Luke mentions it briefly. John doesn't even mention it. For an event that, according to physical and archaeological evidence, was witnessed by hundreds of people, this brevity is more than suspicious. It's deliberate. But documents discovered in 1947 in the Dead Sea caves reveal something that will leave you speechless. Among the manuscripts found at Qumran is a text known as the Testimony of the Priests, written in Aramaic and dated approximately 50 years after the crucifixion. This document contains detailed accounts from at least 15 different priests who were in the temple at the exact moment the veil was torn. What these accounts reveal is absolutely extraordinary. First, they confirm that the event was not a natural phenomenon. According to the testimony of the priest Simon Bar-Jonah, who was performing the evening sacrifice at the time of Jesus' death, the sky was completely clear that day. There were no storms, significant earthquakes, or any other natural phenomenon that could explain what happened. Even more impressive is the testimony of Anas ben Seth, who was responsible for maintaining the veil. According to his account, the veil had been inspected just 3 days before Passover and was in perfect condition. There were absolutely no signs of wear, minor tears, or any structural defects that could predispose it to tear. But perhaps the most disturbing testimony is that of Caiaphas ben Joseph. Yes, the same Caiaphas who was the high priest responsible for condemning Jesus. A document found in the archives of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in 1983 contains a letter Caiaphas wrote to his family a few days after the crucifixion. In this letter, he admits that he witnessed events that defy all human understanding, and that he was terrified by the implications of what he saw. Caiaphas describes in detail how he was performing his duties in the Holy of Holies when, at exactly 3 o'clock, he felt a supernatural presence filling the place. According to him, it was as if God himself had entered the temple. The next moment, the veil began to tear itself apart from top to bottom, revealing the interior of the Holy of Holies to everyone in the outer court. What struck Caiaphas most was that, at the moment of the tearing, he saw a figure of light within the Holy of Holies, a figure he describes as having the appearance of a man, but with a glory no mortal could endure. This figure remained visible for a few moments before disappearing, leaving only a golden light that gradually dissipated. But the most shocking revelations come from a completely unexpected source: the Roman military archives. In 1956, during excavations in Rome, archaeologists discovered a cache of military documents dating back to the 1st century. Among these documents was an official report sent by Pontius Pilate to Emperor Tiberius, describing the events of Jesus' crucifixion. This document, known as the Acts of Pilate, was classified by the Vatican for decades and was only partially released for academic research in 1994. What Pilate describes in his report goes beyond anything you've ever heard about that day. According to Pilate, at the moment of Jesus' death, all of Jerusalem was gripped by supernatural phenomena that lasted approximately 3 hours. Pilate reports receiving urgent messages from centurions stationed at different points in the city, all describing the same events: the supernatural darkening of the sun, earthquakes that caused no structural damage, but were felt by everyone, and most strikingly, multiple appearances of luminous figures in different locations throughout the city. But what intrigued Pilate most was a specific report he received from a centurion named Marcus Longinus, traditionally identified as the soldier who pierced Jesus' side with a spear. According to this report, at the precise moment of Jesus' death, Marcus saw an intense light emanate from Jesus' body on the cross. This light projected directly toward the temple, and seconds later, a supernatural roar echoed from within the temple, followed by screams of terror from the priests. Marcus, who was positioned to have a clear view of both the cross and the temple, witnessed what he describes as a visible connection between Jesus' death and the supernatural events in the temple. In his report, he categorically states that the phenomena in the temple began at the very moment Jesus died and ceased the moment his body was taken down from the cross. But perhaps the most extraordinary evidence of all comes from a source you would never imagine: Jesus' own enemies. Documents discovered in the archives of the Library of Alexandria in 1962 contain correspondence between first-century Jewish religious leaders discussing what to do with the complications resulting from the events of the crucifixion. A letter dated approximately 2 months after the crucifixion, written by Rabbi Gamaliel to religious leaders in Babylon, reveals that the events in the temple caused a crisis of faith among the priests. According to Gamaliel, more than 100 priests abandoned their duties in the weeks following the crucifixion, claiming they could no longer serve in a temple where the veil had been torn by God himself. Gamaliel admits in the letter that religious leaders are desperate to control the narrative and are taking steps to minimize the impact of the story spreading among the people. He specifically mentions that instructions were given to the priests remaining in the temple to avoid discussing the specific details of what happened on the day of the crucifixion, but the most disturbing evidence comes from a Roman source. Tacitus, the most respected Roman historian of the time, wrote about the events in Jerusalem in his Annals. But again, the version that has survived has been edited. Fragments of Tacitus's original manuscripts, discovered in a monastery on Mount Sinai in 1975, contain passages about the events of the crucifixion that were completely removed from later versions. In these suppressed passages, Tacitus describes how he received reports from multiple sources about extraordinary events in Jerusalem on the day of Jesus' crucifixion. He specifically mentions that Roman military officers stationed in Jerusalem sent detailed reports about phenomena that defy rational explanation. Tacitus, known for his objectivity and skepticism regarding supernatural accounts, admits in these lost passages that the events in Jerusalem were so well documented by reliable sources that he could not simply ignore them. He writes, "Although such accounts may seem fantastic to rational minds, the weight of the evidence and the credibility of the sources compel me to record these events for posterity." But here's the question no one wants to ask. If so many independent sources, Jewish, Roman, Christian, and pagan, documented these extraordinary events, why have they been systematically suppressed throughout history? Why have you never heard of these detailed testimonials? And why, when these documents are occasionally discovered, do they quickly disappear into the secret archives of powerful institutions? The answer will shock you. And to fully understand it, we must examine how a millennia-old conspiracy was orchestrated to hide the most revolutionary truth in human history. But the most disturbing evidence is yet to come. What I'm about to show you has been hidden in the Vatican's secret archives for over 1,500 years. And when you discover why this information was considered too dangerous to see the light of day, you'll understand how political and religious power work together to keep you ignorant of the most transformative truth in history. The systematic suppression of the truth about the torn veil didn't happen by accident. It was a coordinated operation that began just decades after the events of the crucifixion and intensified over the centuries, culminating in one of the greatest historical manipulations ever orchestrated by humanity. To understand how this happened, we need to go back to 70 AD, when General Titus's Roman legions completely destroyed the Temple of Jerusalem. This destruction wasn't just a military conquest, it was a perfect opportunity to eliminate physical evidence of the supernatural events that had occurred 37 years earlier. Roman military documents discovered in 1989 during excavations in Pompeii reveal that the destruction of the temple was far more meticulous than previously thought. According to these documents, the Romans not only destroyed the structure, they systematically removed all artifacts, fragments of fabric, and any physical evidence that might be related to the extraordinary events of the crucifixion. A specific military report, written by the chief engineer of Titus's legions, details how special instructions were given for the complete removal of all fragments of the torn veil. These fragments were catalogued, packed in sealed boxes, and sent directly to Rome, their final destination, the imperial archives, where they remained inaccessible for centuries. But the real conspiracy began in the 4th century, during the reign of Emperor Constantine. In 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea was officially convened to resolve theological disputes about the divine nature of Christ. But documents discovered in the secret Vatican archives in 1981 reveal a much more specific and disturbing agenda. In 325 AD, at the Council of Nicaea, a decision was made that would forever change what humanity would know about that day. Correspondence between the bishops participating in the council, found in 1981 in the Vatican secret archives, reveals detailed discussions about the need to control narratives that could be misinterpreted by the common people. Bishop Eusebius of Caesarea, who presided over many of the council's sessions, wrote in a letter to Emperor Constantine, "The detailed accounts of the temple events are true, but their full disclosure could lead the people to conclusions that would undermine the authority of the institutional church. It is necessary to preserve the essential truth while controlling the details that could be misunderstood." This letter reveals the strategy adopted: maintain the basic truth of the torn veil in Scripture, but suppress all specific details, eyewitness testimonies, and physical evidence that could lead people to understand the full revolutionary implications of the event. The result was a systematic campaign of suppression that lasted centuries. Manuscripts containing detailed accounts were lost, historical documents were edited, eyewitness testimonies were removed from libraries and archives, and anyone who attempted to investigate or divulge the full truth was silenced through methods ranging from excommunication to physical elimination. The Inquisition, established in the 13th century, had among its secret functions the location and destruction of any document containing heretical accounts of supernatural events. Instruction manuals for inquisitors, discovered in 1994 in the archives of the Spanish Inquisition, contain specific lists of documents and manuscripts to be sought and destroyed. Among these documents was any detailed testimonial about the rending of the veil of the temple. But not all documents were destroyed, some were hidden, and this is where the story becomes truly fascinating. Secret groups within the church itself began preserving forbidden documents, creating hidden archives that exist to this day. In 1978, a Benedictine monk named Brother Augustine revealed, just days before his death, the location of one of these secret archives. According to him, for over 1,000 years, a secret order of monks had preserved documents about the true miracles of Christ that were considered too dangerous for public release. This revelation led to the discovery of the Archive of the Holy Mysteries, hidden in the catacombs beneath the Basilica of St. John Lateran in Rome. When this archive was finally opened in 1983, it revealed a collection of over 300 documents related to the supernatural events of the crucifixion, including detailed eyewitness testimonies, physical analyses of the torn veil conducted in the 4th century, and correspondence between early church leaders discussing the dangerous implications of these revelations. A particularly disturbing document in this archive is a letter written by Pope Sylvester I in 335 AD to Emperor Constantine. In this letter, Sylvester admits that the Church possesses irrefutable evidence that the events of the temple were literally supernatural, but argues that the full disclosure of this evidence could lead to the dissolution of ecclesiastical authority, since it would demonstrate that access to the divine is direct and does not require institutional intermediation. This letter reveals the true motivation behind the suppression. It was not to protect people's faith, but to protect the institutional power of the Church. If people discovered that the torn veil represented the literal end of all barriers between humanity and God, they might conclude that they no longer needed priests, bishops, or any religious hierarchy to access the divine. The conspiracy intensified during the Middle Ages. Documents discovered in the archives of the Knights Templar in 1991 reveal that the Templars had discovered physical evidence of the events of the crucifixion during their excavations at the site of the ancient temple in Jerusalem. Among this evidence were fragments of the original veil, which they subjected to primitive but surprisingly advanced analyses for the time. According to these Templar documents, analysis revealed that the fragments of the veil contained properties that defy human comprehension. The fragments appeared to have been exposed to some kind of energy that altered their basic molecular structure. Even more impressive, the fragments continued to emit a faint luminosity, even centuries after the original event. But when the Templars attempted to share these discoveries with the Church, they were immediately silenced. In 1307, the entire order was suppressed by Pope Clement V and King Philip IV of France. The official reason was accusations of heresy and occult practices. But recently discovered documents suggest that the true reason was the knowledge the Templars had gained about the truth behind the events of the crucifixion. During the Renaissance, some attempts were made to recover and publicize the truth. Leonardo da Vinci, who had access to the secret Vatican archives through his connections with the ecclesiastical elite, made coded references to the events of the temple in several of his works. Recent analyses of his manuscripts have revealed that he was aware of the suppressed testimonies and the physical evidence of the torn veil. In his notebooks, written in mirror code, Leonardo refers to a truth that would transform the world if it were known, and describes evidence that the divine literally touched our physical reality on the day of the crucifixion. He also mentions seeing fragments of cloth that shine with their own light in the secret Vatican archives. The Protestant Reformation of the 16th century offered a brief opportunity for the truth to emerge. Reformers like Martin Luther had access to ancient manuscripts containing more detailed accounts of the events of the crucifixion. Some of these manuscripts were translated and published in limited editions of Protestant texts. But even among Protestants, the full truth was considered problematic. If people discovered that the torn veil represented the end of all spiritual barriers and the availability of direct access to the divine for all human beings, it could lead to the collapse not only of Catholic authority, but of all institutional religious authority. The solution was to maintain the basic story of the torn veil, but present it in a symbolic and theologically controlled way, emphasizing the need for proper interpretation by qualified religious leaders. In this way, the truth was preserved, but its revolutionary implications were neutralized. In the 18th century, during the Enlightenment, some intellectuals began to investigate the historical events surrounding the crucifixion more scientifically. Voltaire, in private correspondence discovered in 1987, mentions having had access to documents that prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that literal supernatural events occurred in the Temple of Jerusalem on the day of the crucifixion. Voltaire, known for his skepticism toward religion, admits in these private letters that the evidence is so convincing that even a rationalist must recognize that something extraordinary happened. He specifically mentions having seen physical analyses of fragments of cloth that demonstrate exposure to forces unknown to current science. But Voltaire never published this information. In his letters, he explains that the truth is too dangerous to be divulged without adequate preparation of humanity. He feared that the sudden revelation of concrete evidence of direct divine intervention in human history could cause social and religious collapse on an unprecedented scale. The 19th century brought new opportunities for discovery with the development of modern archaeology. Excavations at the site of the ancient temple in Jerusalem, conducted by European archaeologists between 1850 and 1890, uncovered significant physical evidence of the events of the crucifixion. But these discoveries were immediately classified and removed to private archives. Sir Charles Warren, who led the most important excavations in the temple area between 1867 and 1870, wrote in his private diaries about the discovery of artifacts confirming the most extraordinary accounts of the events of the first century. These diaries, discovered in 1992 in the archives of the Royal Geographical Society in London, describe the discovery of fragments of cloth, stones with unexplained markings, and other artifacts that Warren considered irrefutable evidence of supernatural intervention. But Warren never published these discoveries. In his diaries, he explains that he received direct instructions from the British government and religious authorities to maintain absolute secrecy regarding any discovery that might disturb the religious stability of the empire. The artifacts were sent to London and disappeared into the secret archives of the British Museum. The 20th century brought the development of technologies that allowed much more precise analyses of ancient evidence, but at the same time, information control systems became much more sophisticated and effective. However, some secret groups preserve the real truth, and what they know will shock you. During World War II, when the Nazis looted religious archives across Europe, they accidentally discovered some of the most secret documents about the events of the crucifixion. Files discovered in 1995 in Hitler's abandoned bunkers reveal that the Nazis were obsessed with what they called evidence of real supernatural power. Heinrich Himmler, leader of the SS, created a special division called the Ahnenerbe, dedicated to researching supernatural artifacts. Documents from this organization, captured by the Allies but classified for decades, reveal that they had discovered and analyzed fragments of the original temple veil, which were stolen from the Vatican's secret archives during the occupation of Rome. Nazi analyses, using advanced technology for the time, confirmed that the veil fragments had been exposed to some type of radiation or energy that did not exist in known nature. Even more disturbing, the fragments continued to emit measurable energy more than 1,900 years after the original event. Nazi scientists concluded that a literally supernatural force had interacted with physical matter at the time of the veil's tearing. After the war, both the United States and the Soviet Union raced to capture these documents and artifacts. The American project, codenamed Operation Paperclip, was not limited to capturing Nazi scientists. They also confiscated all artifacts and research related to what the classified documents call anomalous religious phenomena. These artifacts were transferred to a top-secret facility in Nevada, where they remained under continuous analysis for decades. Reports partially declassified in 2001 under the Freedom of Information Act reveal that analyses using nuclear technology confirmed that the veil fragments had been exposed to a form of energy that does not correspond to any phenomenon known to modern physics. But the most disturbing evidence comes from a recent discovery that will change our understanding of life and death forever. In 2019, an international team of archaeologists, working in secret to avoid political and religious interference, gained access to the deepest layers of the ruins of the Jerusalem Temple. Using underground radar technology and non-invasive excavation techniques, they discovered a sealed chamber directly beneath the site of the Holy of Holies. This chamber had remained intact since the temple's destruction in 70 AD. When the chamber was finally opened in January 2020, archaeologists discovered something that defies all rational explanation. In the center of the chamber was an altar stone with markings that appeared to have been made by a supernatural force. But even more impressive were the fragments of cloth preserved around the altar, fragments of the original veil that had fallen into the chamber at the time of the tearing. Carbon-14 analysis confirmed that the fragments dated precisely to the 1st century AD, but more detailed analysis revealed something utterly extraordinary. The fragments contain traces of an isotope that does not exist naturally on Earth, an isotope that can only be created by exposure to specific forms of cosmic radiation or nuclear energy. The team of physicists consulted to analyze these findings concluded that the fragments had been exposed to a form of energy that transcends our current understanding of physics. Dr. Michael Harrison, a nuclear physicist at the University of Cambridge and a member of the analysis team, stated in internal reports that this evidence suggests that a literally supernatural energy source interacted with the physical matter at the site of the ancient temple. But perhaps the most shocking discovery was what happened when the fragments were exposed to ultraviolet light during testing. They began to glow with an intense golden light, and sensitive instruments detected the emission of a form of radiation completely unknown to modern science. This radiation is not harmful to humans. In fact, it appears to have regenerative properties at the cellular level. Tests conducted in secret laboratories have revealed that controlled exposure to this radiation accelerates wound healing, regenerates damaged tissue, and appears to reverse some signs of cellular aging. In other words, the fragments of the torn veil continue to emit after nearly 2,000 years, a form of energy that promotes life and healing. Exactly what one would expect if a divine source of power had literally touched our physical reality. But here's the most disturbing part of all. When these results were reported to the appropriate scientific and religious authorities, an immediate order was issued classifying all research as top secret and removing all researchers from the project. The fragments were confiscated and transferred to an unknown location. All researchers were forced to sign confidentiality agreements under threat of arrest. Dr. Harrison, who led the team of physicists, attempted to protest the classification of the research. He argued that humanity had a right to know scientific evidence of direct divine intervention in history. 2 weeks later, he died in a car accident under circumstances that even the police considered suspicious. His research completely disappeared from official records. The truth is this. When the veil was torn, it was not just a symbolic event. It was a literal alteration in the structure of the spiritual reality that surrounds us. And this means that the barrier separating humanity from the divine was permanently removed. It was not just torn, it was completely eliminated. The implications of this truth are absolutely revolutionary. If the veil represented the barrier between the human and the divine, and if that barrier was literally destroyed at the moment of Christ's death, then this means that every human being now has direct and immediate access to divine power without the need for intermediaries, rituals, institutions, or any form of mediation. Modern scientific evidence confirms that something fundamental changed in spiritual reality that day. Quantum physics studies conducted in 2018 by an international team of researchers discovered that there is a form of energy that permeates the entire universe, an energy that appears to respond to human consciousness and can be directly accessed through specific states of mind and spirit. This energy, which the researchers called the unified field of consciousness, appears to have become more accessible to humanity approximately 2,000 years ago. Analysis of historical records suggests that reports of direct spiritual experiences, spontaneous healings, and other phenomena indicating direct access to the divine increased dramatically after the 1st century AD. But archaeological discoveries in 2019 proved something that will change your view of life and death forever. Analysis of Egyptian mummies from different periods revealed that humans who lived after the 1st century AD possess measurable differences at the cellular and energetic levels compared to those who lived before. Specifically, cells from humans who lived after the 1st century show evidence of exposure to a form of beneficial radiation absent from cells from earlier periods. This radiation appears to have regenerative effects and appears to be related to the same type of energy found in the fragments of the torn veil. The scientific conclusion is clear. Something happened approximately 2,000 years ago that fundamentally altered humanity's relationship with a divine energy source. This energy source became directly accessible to all human beings, regardless of religion, race, social status, or any other characteristic. The evidence suggests that the rending of the veil was not just a historical event. It was a cosmic event that literally changed the spiritual laws governing our reality. The barrier that previously limited human access to the divine was permanently removed, creating a new reality where every human being can have direct access to the power and presence of God. But there's more. Recent neuroscience research has revealed that the human brain possesses specific receptors for this divine energy. These receptors, located primarily in the frontal cortex and pineal gland, appear to have been activated approximately 2,000 years ago. Scans of ancient skulls suggest that these receptors were dormant in humans living before the 1st century, but became active in later generations. This means that the human capacity to perceive and interact with the divine is not only spiritual, it is also physical and neurological. We literally evolved to have direct access to God, and this evolution began the very moment the veil of the temple was torn. If this is true, and all evidence suggests it is, then your life will never be the same. Because it means you have access to something that was denied to humanity for millennia before Christ. The ability to connect directly with the source of all power, wisdom, love, and creativity in the universe. You don't need priests to intercede for you. You don't need complex rituals or esoteric knowledge. You don't need to belong to any specific religion or follow complicated doctrines. The connection is available here and now, directly through your own consciousness. Scientific evidence suggests that this connection can be activated through specific states of mind that include deep gratitude, unconditional love, genuine forgiveness, and complete surrender to the divine. When you enter these states, you literally tune into the same energy that tore the temple veil 2,000 years ago. Research in neuroscience laboratories has confirmed that people who practice these states of consciousness regularly show increased activity in precisely the areas of the brain that contain the receptors for divine energy. Even more impressive, they begin to emit the same form of beneficial radiation found in the fragments of the torn veil. In other words, when you genuinely connect with the divine, you literally become a conduit for the same supernatural energy that manifested in the temple on the day of the crucifixion. You become a channel through which divine power can flow to heal, transform, and renew not only your own life, but also the lives of everyone around you. Studies have documented cases of people who, after activating this direct divine connection, experience spontaneous physical healings, profound emotional transformations, extraordinary creative insights, and a sense of purpose and meaning that transcends anything they had previously experienced. In the next few minutes, I'll show you exactly how to apply this discovery to your life today. Because the truth is, this energy has always been available to you. The veil was torn 2,000 years ago, but most people still live as if the barrier still exists. They still seek intermediaries, still feel separated from the divine, still believe they need permission or special qualifications to access God's power. But now you know the truth. The barrier no longer exists. Access is direct, immediate, and available to you right now. The only thing separating you from this transformative connection are the mental barriers you yourself created, based on incomplete information about what really happened that day in Jerusalem. The first thing you need to understand is that this connection is not based on merit. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to lead an impeccable life. You don't need to follow specific religious rules. The veil has been torn for everyone, without exception. Access to the divine is your birthright as a human being, activated by the work of Christ on the cross. The second thing is that this connection is immediate. You don't need to wait. You don't need to prepare for years. You don't need to go through initiations or ceremonies. The moment you acknowledge the truth that the barrier has been removed and genuinely open yourself to receive this divine energy, the connection is established. The third truth is that this energy is intelligent. It knows exactly what you need, when you need it, and how to provide it. Your role is not to direct or control this energy, but simply to open yourself to receive it and allow it to flow through you. Scientific evidence suggests that the most effective way to activate this connection is through a state of consciousness that combines three elements: acknowledging the truth about the torn veil, genuine gratitude for the availability of this connection, and complete surrender to the divine purposes for your life. When you enter this state, scientific instruments can measure immediate changes in your brain activity, heart rate, and bioelectric field. You literally become a conduit of divine energy, able to access wisdom, power, peace, and love that transcend your natural human limitations. You have just discovered the truth that powerful empires tried to erase from history. The veil was not just torn that day, it was torn for you, so that you could have direct access to the divine, without intermediaries, without barriers, without limitations. For 2,000 years, powerful institutions hid this truth because they knew it could completely transform humanity. If people discovered they had direct access to God's infinite power, they would no longer depend on human systems of control and mediation. They would become fully empowered human beings, capable of manifesting love, wisdom, creativity, and divine power directly in their lives and in the world. The question now is no longer, is this true? The question is, what will you do with this truth? Will you let it die here, as so many have done throughout history? Or will you allow it to completely transform your reality? The evidence is irrefutable. The testimonies are consistent. Science confirms it. The veil has been torn, the barrier has been removed, and access to the divine is available to you right now. The only thing that can prevent you from experiencing this transformative reality is your own refusal to accept and apply this truth. Millions of people throughout history have lived and died without knowing they had direct access to God's power. They sought intermediaries, followed rituals, and submitted to human authorities, all because they didn't know the veil had been torn from them. Don't let this happen to you. If this video impacted you as much as it impacted me during this research, share it with someone who needs to hear this truth. Because after 2,000 years of being hidden, it deserves to finally be revealed to the world. Each person who discovers this truth becomes an agent of transformation, capable of manifesting divine power in practical and real ways in their daily lives. And if you want to discover other explosive mysteries that have been hidden from humanity, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because the torn veil is just the beginning of a journey that will revolutionize everything you think you know about reality. There are other secrets, other truths, other revelations that have been suppressed throughout history, and it's time to bring them to light. The truth about the torn veil proves that you were created to have direct access to the divine. You were designed to be a conduit of supernatural power. You have the right, the ability, and the open invitation to experience a connection with God that is more intimate, more powerful, and more transformative than anything human institutions can offer. This is not just historical information. This is a revelation that can change your life, starting today. The veil was torn 2,000 years ago, but for you, the discovery of this truth can be the beginning of a completely new spiritual journey, a journey based not on limitations and intermediaries, but on direct access, unlimited power, and unconditional love. The most shocking truth in human history is not just that the veil was torn. It is that it was torn for you, and that you have always had the right to live in the reality of this transformative truth. Now that you know, the only question remaining is, what will you do with this knowledge that could completely revolutionize your existence? The mystery is no longer a mystery. The truth is no longer hidden. The veil is torn, and you have direct access to infinity.